Hi friends, Mindy here. I have a little project for you today. I'm going to be setting up my journal for Junk Journal July. This is a challenge that's hosted by Meg Journals here on YouTube and on Instagram, along with Get Messy Art. And so I am just showing you a few of the journals that I have created for this project in the past. I have done a couple of Junk Journal July and one Junk Journal January. And so I'm just kind of doing a flip through here of these, not a full flip through, but these are the journals that I've done, and they roughly measure anywhere between like 4x6 to like 5x7, depending on the journal. This one is actually a book that I altered that I really enjoyed that process. But this month I'm going to try and do something different, something that I have not done before, which is kind of following the journal style that Meg uses, which is kind of an accordion concertina fold style. So I have some book board here. This is it's a little bit heavier than the chipboard you would find like in a cereal box or something like that, but it's not quite like heavyweight book cover weight, but it is substantial enough. That's what you see there, that black square. My journal, it roughly measures, I think, like 4.5 by 6.5, something ish like that. And then what I'm going to be doing is just using up my scraps. I am on a mission to get through some of these. If you've seen some other videos of mine, you'll know that that was my 100-day project. And also this is Junk Journal July. So I'm going to be using my scraps. So what I'm doing is I cut down what will be the cover for this journal, and I'm just kind of gluing these papers together. I'm going to just sort of piece them together, do a lot of just gluing and piecing and just really kind of creating a patchwork with these papers. And I'm going to keep them about the same size as the cover. I'm not worried if they stick out a little bit more or if they're too short or whatever. The size doesn't, it's just kind of, a rough estimate, but I am using mostly neutral papers. And so the thing that I did learn through this was a lot of the papers that I'm using are basically leftover scrapbook papers, things I've used in journals and that kind of thing. But they're one-sided. And so this project, because it's a double-sided, accordion fold kind of journal, really would have been better with double-sided papers. I did try to use some of them, but I really was just keeping to what was in my stash. So this is actually a vintage index page of a book. So I'm going to trim this down a little bit, but I wanted to keep that kind of rough edge there on the left side. So I'm just going to use my ruler and tear this down just a little bit. And you can see I'm using a Yoo-Hoo glue stick. That is my preferred glue stick for projects like this, where you're like collage master boards and those kinds of things. I really prefer a Yoo-Hoo glue stick for that. It dries well, and I haven't really had any trouble with it. So I do have this other music paper. This is actually not music paper. It's pattern paper that looks like music paper. So on the back side of it, it is white. And so this is kind of where it gets a little bit tricky, because I ended up having to add more layers already kind of from the start to kind of cover up some of that white. And so, maybe keep that in mind. It just really depends, but I really was trying to just use up what was in my stash. I had gone through and kind of sorted through some of my scraps and tried to get them a little bit more organized. And so I just pulled out everything that was really, really neutral, and that is going to be the base of my journal. So you can see here I have a coffee dyed piece of paper here, and this is actually some wallpaper that I'm going to glue down. And this one I did have to come back and add a little bit of liquid glue at the end. But for the most part, for the kind of basic construction of this journal, this Yoo-Hoo glue stick worked just fine. So one thing I will say that I wish I had done a little bit differently in this process is I wish I had glued everything together and then done the folding, because when you try to do the folding, when the glue is still wet, when it hasn't dried completely, it just creates some weird folds, and things slide a little bit more, and they lift a little bit. And so I really wish that I had done that from the beginning, or just, given myself some more time to let it dry. But instead, you can see I just went right into the folding and everything of this. This is basically what the backside will look like. I am going to add a little bit of coffee dyed paper right here along the backside of what that wallpaper is, just because that was such a narrow piece. It was like just barely hanging on to that book text. And so I wanted to just really add that in to secure it, so that I didn't have a gap. And I'm just going to start folding. So basically the first half of the month will be on the front, and then when you flip it to the back side, I will be able to do the back half of the month. I'm really excited about this process because for each little day that I'm working on, it gives me the opportunity to actually like fold things over or move things to the back and just kind of give myself some extra interest to work with it. So I'm really excited to do that. This is some other pattern paper that I had that was double-sided. And like I said, you know, this is the first time I've used this sort of patchwork technique for creating a journal. This is some packaging, actually some Amazon packaging, and just using a lot of different weights and textures, which actually kind of made it a little bit more difficult in terms of like the folding and making sure everything was going to stay stuck together, which is why in hindsight, I would have really just created the long piece and let it dry and then went back in and folded it. But this, you know, this was a learning curve a little bit for me. I just wanted to give this a try. I've done accordion things before, but I always did a different type of hinge on it. And so it didn't quite work this same way because I'm, you know, kind of doing like Franken paper basically with everything. So I decided to go ahead and glue down the pages to the cover, to the inside cover, just to make this a little bit easier for me while I'm working, because I really am trying to keep everything in the same size. And I was afraid that everything was kind of starting to kind of go downhill a little bit. And I wanted to keep things not necessarily perfectly straight because that's going to be impossible, but, you know, straight-ish, I guess. So I'm going back through and like where there are spaces and there's gaps or whatever, I'll add another layer, just making sure that my folds are nice and neat. And then there are a few areas where I go back through and trim it if it's, you know, overhanging just a little bit. I added in this is some actual paper from Archer and Olive. It's like a dot grid. I added some of that in there. So I just have a wide variety of papers, but you can see I'm just trying to extend this up now so that it has the same height on it. And this will just give me a little bit of a base to kind of work with. Some of these papers may get completely covered up, and that's okay too. They're literally just scraps. So some of it may get, completely covered. Some of it I may use as part of the kind of jumping off point for that day's prompt. There is a prompt list. I didn't mention that, but you can get that at Meg Journals as well. And so, I don't really know what each day is going to look like. I will say that because I did have so many papers that had so much white on the backside, I did end up going back and adding a lot of papers and layers and stuff to cover that up, because the white, I thought I was just going to leave the white and I'd be okay with it until the actual, July prompt and whatever, but I couldn't deal with it. So I did leave little bits of white here and there, but for the most part, I did go back through and just make sure everything was covered up, and I'll show you that in a minute. I'm not going to make you watch the entire process of me gluing all of these pages together because it wasn't difficult, but it did take a little bit of time just getting everything sized together. I also added in an envelope, and I think I forgot to film that section of it, but where just I would have another just fun little element, kind of an interactive tuck spot kind of situation. So I have some hymnal paper here that I'm adding in, and just lots of different types of papers. And like I said, there's lots of different weights of papers here, trying to cover up some of that white as I'm gluing along here. A lot of scrapbook paper. Like I said, I did even add in a journaling card at one point. This is an old paper from, an old vintage paper from, looks like a map. You can see there's that journaling card there. That was actually from By the Well for God, from one of the little mini pocket Bibles. And then everything else, this is basically how everything looks now that it's finished. I did decorate a little bit on the front. You can see how everything is kind of pieced together here. So there's that journaling card, some more book text. This is some washi tape. This is actually from 49 Market, and it's like a repositionable fabric washi, and it worked really well for some of these sections where I wanted to add a little bit of color back in. I have some beautiful Braille paper in there. There's that envelope I was talking about. I will decorate that more obviously on the day. And then it did create a little bit of problem for me. I had this tag that I added in also, and then the tag cracked, which was really a pain because it was right at the end. So I ended up having to go in and add some washi just to secure all of that in there. It should be fine. And then I have another piece of wallpaper. I will decorate the back eventually. I just didn't do that for this video. And then you can kind of see I've added some washi and some other little strips here. This is really where I was trying to cover up all of that white area. So I just pulled out some ledger paper and different things. I do have a little bit there, but it'll be okay. I added this tag and then it got covered up, so that's fine. I added something that had been stamped that was just in my stash again. I do have a little white here. We'll cover that up on the day with the prompt and everything, but that's basically it for me. So if you liked this video, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Let me know if you'd like to see some process videos as Junk Journal July progresses, and I will maybe do some of that so you can see how this is working out. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and until next time, bye.